I'm Katie Knoeringer, and I'm here at Art Space talking about my work. I'm an artist and educator. I teach drawing at Murray State University in Murray, Kentucky, and I wanted to show you a little bit of my work. So I make a lot of drawings, and so I have some of the work that I made while I was at Art Space this summer. I'll show you some of these. I was fortunate enough to talk to the artists who are here, who have studios, and they let me into their studios to draw them and hang out with them. So I capture people in motion while they're working. And so you'll see a lot of these drawings are kind of loose. And I make more than one drawing of each person in order to make I make bigger collage work in color. So these are all one person here. And the nice thing about making work at Art Space was that I could go back to the places, go back to people's studios if I needed to capture a detail, or like thinking about what a sewing machine looks like. Or what the space looked like if I needed more information about the space. And this is my current sketchbook. I use my family as models a lot, and so it was exciting for me to have other people to work with. Kind of a new challenge. I'm unwrapping some work that was exhibited at Art Space. So after my residency, I was here for a month making work, and the work that I made during that month was exhibited all together in one show. So some of the drawings you just saw were in the show, and from the drawings, I made, let me see here. I made these larger scale works that are painted paper. I paint the paper and cut it up to build the figure and the space around it. And what I do is I build the negative space while I'm building the figure. And so it's almost like a mosaic, if you think about it like that, where instead of sort of like laying a backdrop down and then putting a figure on top of it, I'm working with the edge of the figure while I'm making the figure. So this, the purple, or like the purple beside the foot, is helping to shape the edge of the foot. I'm thinking about both of those spaces while I'm making the image. So I use the sketches that I make to kind of like graph together the space and the way that I want the figure to look in that space. And because I am making the drawing and then working from the drawing, I don't have to necessarily adhere to realistic color. I mean, it's kind of naturalistic, but it doesn't have to be totally realistic. If I'm just thinking about whether something was light or dark, then I can make it whatever color I want. Blue, purple, green. So this light, this was actually a window with light coming through it. So making that pink, it's sort of an artistic decision instead of what that light actually looked like. This one's a self-portrait. This I made from the space that I was staying in. I was staying at someone's house, and I made some drawings in the living room. And this, it took a couple of sketches. I needed something on the floor, and so I took some liberties with the rug, made it more colorful. I added in the slippers. This one was a lot of fun to make. This is where I really started to have fun, I think, drawing the figure itself. And each person's studio was sort of a different challenge. Thinking about where to sit or stand, making the drawings. And I've been experimenting with leaving more white space in the work. So this one in particular has a lot of white space. I like to think about the shape that the color makes. And as I was working, I realized that I was drawing women in their studios. So all the work in the show ended up being women makers. Not necessarily on purpose, that's just kind of how it worked out. I think the people that I ran into and the people I gravitated towards This is one of the first pieces I made this summer, and it went through some changes. I had a chair in this at some point, which kind of got edited out. And that is part of the process of, you can see the memory of things and how I change it and how the image is made by looking at like these seams, like where all these little pieces come together to make the image. So I really like that about working this way, that my kind of process is revealed. Nothing is kind of hidden. The same with the drawings. I was really happy to show drawings with this work, to make my process totally transparent. And I think the drawings are pretty exciting. So to be able to show them with this more resolved work, the color work, I was really excited about that. I used to make a lot of work about enclosed spaces. I was living in a city and it seemed like everyone had kind of carved out their own little space. And so things like a back patio or a view out a window or like narrow spaces or spaces with things in them, things and people kind of getting closer to each other. So that is where I kind of started making this kind of work, thinking about kind of in-between spaces. And really, I think it's because I think so much about positive and negative space that that kind of influenced my work. So I would start looking for these kind of like narrow spaces, and maybe there's a strong light or an interesting shape of shadow. Well, I've done a lot of drawing and observing my husband, who is an artist, and that is kind of, it's just been kind of a natural process for me. When I observed people working at Art Space this summer, I think it just, it allowed me to focus more on the figure in my work rather than just the space. I was interested in creating different shapes. Like, I want to be able to make an image of a person recognizable without it being a portrait. So someone's posture, or maybe just the kind of the way they sit, or some attribute about them that has more to do with their physicality than just their face, their portrait. So that's something I was able to really do, tap into working with different artists in their spaces. The more work that I make like this, the more I think about how much information is necessary for it to be a recognizable individual, or for it to be, for the image to communicate a space. And I can really play with that. And I think something that working with people that I already know, it kind of gives me the freedom to distort them a little bit, or move away from what they actually look like, and let kind of strange things happen, and kind of go with it in the piece. So sometimes when I make a drawing that I know I'm going to make into a collage piece, there may be some color present that has kind of attracted me to that particular scene. And so I may be thinking about that color or a color combination, but by working from the drawings, like removing myself from what I'm actually referencing, I can play around with the color a little bit. And I do think about the color being playful and a little more exaggerated than the natural world. And I think about light and dark a lot, light and dark contrast. So that influences my color choice quite a bit. So I like recording kind of everyday details. I think there's something to be said about paying attention to things, kind of noticing ordinary things. And there's a sort of a long history of that in art. If you think about like Fairfield Porter or Matisse, sort of capturing these everyday kind of scenes, it's like I think there's something powerful about that, and it's almost a little bit like record keeping in a way, like noticing these details and recording them. I'm not necessarily titling my works after the name of the person. I title them Maker 1, Maker 2, Maker 3, So, I mean, the individual's identity is important to me making the work. It's impetus for me to begin the work, but as far as the finished work, it's not as important. So I had an amazing time at ArtSpace making work for a whole month. It's really, that's a luxury for me, teaching and having a 2-year-old sort of like absorb a lot of my time. And so to be able to just focus on making things was really incredible. And then as far as getting to see people in their studios and feel like I'm part of a community, even in just that short amount of time, I felt like I was really able to connect with people. And making art or making things is such, it's such a personal process, but it's also very, to be able to be the fly on the wall in somebody's studio is, it just feels really great. Feeds my studio practice. So I'm gonna walk you through what I do to start a piece on board. So I'm working on this this painted board, and this is my sketchbook. I have this drawing, but it doesn't necessarily have a lot of information about light and shadow, so I might not necessarily use this. This drawing has a lot of information on light and shadow, so I think I'm going to use this. And this was another idea I had, but again, I think I have to go back to the space. I need a little bit more detail of the floor and the furniture. So I'm going to work with this drawing. That's kind of like how I decide what I want to make. I'm thinking about light and dark, and so you see light and dark in my drawing, but there's no color. So I'm free to make the color choices that I want to make. And doing that rather than working from a photo enables me to do that, to kind of like free up my choices. And all I'm going to do is start cutting some shapes. So what I like to do is, rather than kind of lay everything out and then glue it down, I'll go piece by piece. So I'm using a brush, and I'm using this gel medium, which has a particular finish that I like. It's matte, but it's also a little bit waxy when it dries. So that's what I'm using underneath the paper and on top of it to kind of seal it. And so if I'm working from my drawing, I'm making this towel that has a pattern on it. So rather than make the entire shape of the towel with one color and then put the pattern on top of it, I like to work in between my shapes to kind of respond to the edges that I'm seeing and edit the edges as I go. So it's kind of, it maybe it's a little bit counterintuitive to the way people normally paint, but the thing that I really like about it is that it allows for little idiosyncrasies to come through in the work. And that's part of what makes it so exciting, is like I'm responding and reacting. I'm not sort of like planning everything out and making it perfect. I'm reacting to this as I build it. And so this would be some of the pattern on the towel. I do want to get to some of the shadow. There's a cast shadow here that's really nice. And for the shadow, I think I'm going to use purple. So I want it to be something dark. It's pretty dark in my drawing, pretty dramatic shape. And I'm trying to get these pieces flat, but if they're a little bit bubbly or wrinkled, I kind of like that. I think that's part of working with this material. So I'm not trying to kind of like make it perfect. I like showing the process, how it's made. So this would be my shadow. Also, if I run out of one color and I use a slightly different color, that those little shifts I think are really exciting. Again, alluding to the process. I can keep kind of building this pattern on the towel. I made an image once that had a chain link fence in it, and I made the chain link sort of individual shapes, and it was kind of maddening but also really satisfying. But that's kind of what I'm doing here with this towel pattern. It would take me a little while to kind of build it up, but to get in between these little shapes is to consider them. And if I need to move an edge, I can just move it a little bit by adding another little sliver of paper. So you can kind of see this taking shape a little bit. All right, so this is a completed piece that something that I would make on board. So this is on that painted board, and this image was done from a drawing of a car in Raleigh that I was really thinking about the color of the car. That's what made me want to make this, and the contrast between the car and the space behind it. So that's what drove me making this piece, and I kind of invented or the space behind it, rather than making it super specific, like making the house that was behind the car, I'm really just making shapes of color, this kind of almost like a mountain landscape, these 3 shifts of color, and leaving some white space at the top. This is a smaller piece that I made. This was based on some drawings of house plants. I made several of them, and this has a lot more white space in it than the other finished work. But this was really, I was kind of thinking about how elegant and distinct the leaves and the branches were of this particular plant. So to emphasize the white space, I'm choosing a dark color, this darker purple, and then just mixing it up a little bit with a few other purples to keep it interesting.